Weird Science
is the revolution.
Ultimate X-Men #2 is written by Peach Momoko, art by Peach Momoko, letters by VC's Travis Lanham, and script adaptation by Zach Davison. I'm going to give you a little bit of the recap, get everybody back on board here. On the night of her middle school graduation, a young girl named Hiso Ichikai had unusual powers awaken to protect her from a car accident. We saw the armor powers, and from a sinister shadow seeking vengeance against the people who had tormented Hiso's childhood friend, Tsubasa, into taking his own life. The shadow promised Hiso that the first victim would be Tsubasa's coach. The next day, the coach was found dead under mysterious circumstances. They kind of called him the gym teacher, I believe, in the first issue, but it's that guy. And before I get into this, I'll let everybody know, quite like the first issue, I ended up doing an expanded review with my man, Jason. Jason does the X-Men stuff for the Weird Science family of podcasts, and you can end up hearing me and him talk about it on our Marvel podcast that comes out each Saturday night. There are links in the description of this video to get to that. But I'll tell you right now, I kind of was a little upset that I didn't like this issue as much as the first. And I say that it's one of those things when you have such a polarizing thing like this Ultimate X-Men, where some people are so against it and then some people are so into it that, you know, you get a little battle lines drawn. And I have been trying to tell people, let's, give it a chance. I'm not going to tell you that I said the first issue was incredible or the best thing ever, but the idea of this, it almost feels like you want to give it a better score to kind of combat the people who are giving it such low scores, but I can't play that game. And so when this ends up coming out and I read it, I was upset because I really hoped that there'd be something in this issue that I could say, oh my God, the people who are hating on it, they're actually going to like this. This might be the gateway into them giving it more of a chance. In fact, I think that this issue pulls a lot of people who don't like it already even further away, because I'm telling you, it's very clunky. It's very clunky. Now, the last issue came out 5 weeks ago. So, a week difference, that's not a delay. But in a manga-influenced deal, and I'm telling you, when I read this, my mind kind of clicks into the manga mind here. And the problem is when you're done a manga that you don't get too much from, you think, oh, well, next week I'll get more. You have to wait 4 or 5 weeks for the next deal. And I don't think we're getting enough each issue. And it just feels like you need more, and you need more to grab people into it in what is kind of a subtle, weird issue that gets clunky. It really does as we get introduced to a new character who I love, but kind of ends up showing up in a very, very odd way. But we start off with Hiso, and she's laying in bed. We see that since her friend Tsubasa has been gone, and even the stuff that's going on with the shadow, she's kind of hanging out by herself. She seems a bit depressed. And as she is laying in bed, you see this shadowy from the shadow, but like almost like a tendril type, symbiotic goo type deal. It's coming through the ceiling as she's looking up, and then ends up kind of like going on her face as she goes off into dreamland / nightmare land. Now, this is a very odd kind of play here, but she ends up thinking back at a conversation that she had with Tsubasa. But again, this is playing out like almost like to me a nightmare that may or might not have happened, but the idea that the concept is there of what this conversation she had with Tsubasa, who is kind of like, yeah, I don't really feel like I want to go to school. Kind of feel like I want to quit school. Now, we know what happened. He was bullied. This was something big enough for him to do what he did. And she's like kind of oblivious to it. Oh man, really? Dropping out of school? That's so punk rock. Like she thinks that's cool. It really felt like at this point it was Tsubasa for a cry for help, because even in this dream / nightmare escape there, you end up having him kind of in a fetal position and not talking. And it really feels like this is the shadow again, kind of reminding her that there were warning signs that she didn't do anything about. Now, you have to keep remembering when you go through this, the idea that her friend did end up doing, Tsubasa did end up taking his own life in that way. And this is something that it seems like the shadow wants revenge for, and kind of showing, Hiso that she was involved as well. Her not doing anything. It's, there's the bullies that obviously they're kind of getting taken care of, but also people like Hiso should have known this and should have done something and didn't. But it's just this reminder, but it could just be her, having this dream type deal where she's just, okay, the shadow. But no, because when she wakes up, suddenly she's startled out of a dream. Goes, oh, a dream? But then she has this scrunched up, rolled up piece of paper in her hand. That's kind of freaky. You know, you go to sleep, you fall asleep, you have a dream/nightmare, wake up, and there's this rolled up piece of paper, quite like the piece of paper that told her to go to the temple in the first issue. So she's kind of freaked out with that. Her mom ends up yelling to her and says, are you going to your motorcycle riding class? Can you pick up some eggs? Weird, like motorcycle riding class out of nowhere. But she's like, sure, Mom, and says, hey, don't forget to bring a bag so they don't charge you for plastic. Kind of little weird details. But as she ends up going, and you see her, she's on her bike at this point, but she does end up going to get the eggs. I can only say, and these transitions are a little bit wonky. You don't know how much time has passed. Some of this is Peach Momoko will use some of the things from a manga, some of the tropes of that, but then other things she's not, because it's a Western comic here, and I think that there's something lost a bit in the translation. But I get the idea that Hisoko's there with the eggs, and she's like, she doesn't know if she should go or look at this note. She doesn't know if she should just go home. She's already gotten the eggs. And then this is where it gets completely wonky, because I do like this character of May. I think most people who are reading this book have probably seen the character design, even to the point where they've spelled out in different things that she is going to be another mutant, and the idea that she is kind of obsessed with Storm. Finally, at the point going with the name May Storm, which is kind of cool, but she ends up and she sees, and I'm saying that May sees Hisoka and says, hey, it's you, right? Now, you get this idea. This is the first time they've talked. It's like her just recognizing Hisoka and says, that girl from the car wreck a few weeks ago, right there should be warning signs, full out red flags going, because if you read the first issue, nobody knows that Hisoka was part of that accident. In fact, there were reports that, yes, there was a girl involved, but they never knew. And even the play of this guy ended up, and again, I should explain more of it. The guy was driving a car, almost hit because Hisoka wasn't paying attention, almost hit him, and the armor field transformed around her and pretty much crushed the car, but protected Hisoka. So when you have all that, one of the big plays was her trying to make sure that nobody knew it was her. It didn't seem like it was general knowledge by anybody. But yet here's this May who says the girl from the car crash. And it seems very, very odd, because if people knew about the car crash, they definitely know about the armor, because the car was demolished and she wasn't hurt. So it's a weird play. And in my mind, if this is me and I'm Hisoka, I'm like, is this somebody sent from the shadow? Like, why would they know? And she's like, no, you got the wrong person. I mean, yeah, she's denying it, but it's a little more than that. And then May's like, I don't think so. I'm May. What's your story? Hey, you could trust me here. I'll show you my secret. And then ends up where she pulls out this doll type thing and says, the doll sings even though she doesn't have any batteries. Cute, huh? That's making this doll able to animate. It is very weird. And in this whole thing, Hisoka having this power, she just ended up finding out she is a bit of a loner. Tsubasa ends up taking his life. Like, she is kind of like, this girl's weird, but I'm kind of weird too, and maybe we can get along, but it's too quick. I mean, this is a scene where you have Hisoka where she's gonna maybe go to the school to confront the shadow monster. She's sitting there, and then suddenly this girl just comes and says, hey, I know everything about you that really nobody should. And look, I have weird powers. Aren't I cool? And it's very, very odd. It's very rushed. This seems like this should have been set up gradually to get to a point where, oh my God, you're a mutant like me, but it's just thrown at you. And it's very, very, it's weird. It threw me off. So in that, though, then, Hisoka says, hey, by the way, I have this note. You want to come with me? Now, again, if this was set up that they ended up becoming friends, realizing, oh my God, we're both mutants, and then you have Hisoka say, I kind of need backup here. You want to go see what's going on? You're pretty cool. You're like me. But this is like what feels like 30 seconds of just, hey, look at me. I make this doll work. Let's go. Very odd. And says, here it is. It's note. And it says, meet me at the abandoned school. And it's the same, like we said, of the shadow guy. And I'm going to say Shadow King because by the end, I think that it really is very obvious of that. But you end up where they end up going to the school. You see some of the tendril type stuff, shadow stuff going where they're not quite aware. But as they're going in there, they start talking a little bit about, hey, you're a superhero. Oh my, not me. Oh, you have powers too. These sort of things. They end up stepping on what appears to be a shadowy thing at first, but then they say, oh, it's just this like left stuffed animal that just looks disgusting, and like, oh man, don't touch that. And then a cop shows up and says, hey, what are you kids doing here? What are you kids doing in the abandoned school? What are you causing trouble? It did feel weird that but there you go. You have an abandoned school. Nobody's supposed to be there. I get it. You don't really, I didn't really think much of that right away. He's kind of sus, as we see, and kind of part of this, because then they just walk and they end up finding a room that ends up having a bunch of paper talismans on the wall. You have candles burning, and you have these, what looks like almost those stuffed animals that they stepped on, hanging almost like they're dripping blood or goo. It's very disturbing. When me and Jason did talk about this, we did mention that some of the horror aspect gets pulled away with the kind of pastel watercolor colors. Like maybe if this was pure black and white like a manga, it would have been more horrific looking. But it's kind of weird when you have that kind of watercolory look with it. But if you've read any horror manga, it's the scene you get. I immediately thought of Jujutsu Kaisen, but there's so many others of it. And this, I think that when people were reading the first edition, I think it'll be more here where people are kind of getting like, oh, this reminds me of that. It reminds them of a bunch of different mangas. But that shadowy figure is in this room and says, hello, Hiso. Thank you for accepting my invitation once again. You know the three boys who bullied Tsubasa. They won't be around anymore. I wanted to let you know that they will end up taking their own lives. I have set it up. And then says, I see you brought a friend. Not reacting kind of to the cop, because then the cop seems to be the one who says it. And then we see that the cop is actually part of the shadowy deal and is made of worms and maggots and says, like, who's that killer? And it's like, yeah, it's crazy, because you end up where you see where it's got, as Hiso points at the shadow, says to the cop, sir, he's a killer. And then the cop, who's now falling apart worm, says, who's a killer? And then they run. But in this, if you look through this, May, who I do really like, she comes in a weird way and just all of a sudden is there and says, hey, I know you were the girl who got in the crash. But she's actually seems to be enjoying this and ends up turning around as they're running and uses wind powers against this horrific cop turned into worm maggot monster. And you do end up having Hiso says, oh my God, how did you do that? But I think that it could have played out a little better and stronger with the art, because you already see that this cop has worms and stuff falling off of him. And then when you end up getting May attack him with these wind powers, it doesn't seem like that much more. You get a couple leaves or something. You could have played this out a little more. But as that's going on, the shadow deal comes through and is going to attack him fully. And that's where you have Hiso say, stop, let's get out of here. And ends up the armor is activated, but also the eggs that she got for her mom get thrown and end up dissipating the shadow. The shadow kind of falls. And this seems like a bit of a folklore thing, what represents eggs and things like that in the play. But again, May's all excited. I think that Hiso's like, my mom's going to kill me. I don't have enough money to go get more eggs. She says, the eggs are my mom. And then you end up going from the scene, the transition is this kind of shadow energy over the school transfers to a house, which I thought was Hiso's house at first. But then we go into a closet where we see a guy. And this is where I think that it really shows you Shadow King, because the guy in this room, and it's a kind of like a part of a closet that he's in, you end up having more of the paper talismans up. You do see one of them has a picture of Hiso, and he's like, he has a fez looking thing on him and has round glasses. It looks like that is the hints of full out Shadow King, and it makes sense. He pulls the fez kind of off, and you see, and even with the art, it's a little clunky, because I think that underneath him on this platform he's on in his closet, it looked like stuffed animals like the ones that we saw in the deal. But the weird place, he says, that girl, I know her face from somewhere, Hiso, as if but the shadow, which you get the idea that he was projecting that, whatever, was mentioning her by name throughout. So it's kind of a weird, unless this is, okay, I know her name, but it seems like there's a disconnect between the shadow that's attacking and this kid here that's in this closet that seemed to maybe be connected to it. It's very odd, but he seems to know, and he doesn't seem like he's very happy. Like, this doesn't seem like he's like, yeah, I want to hang out with her. She's pretty cool. Like, yeah, it seems trouble. And then we just go off to continue what will be the deal to have May. And as it go kind of together, you go to the Iridori High School entrance ceremony, a big thing in Japan, these entrance ceremonies. And there's the surprise, May and Aseko, they're both there, or Hiso, they're both there together in this school. And she's like, oh my God, this is great. We're friends. We're in, and they're like best buds now. But again, I'd be like, hey, how about that crazy shadow monster, huh? Like, I get the idea that that sort of thing will bond you a bit, but it was too quick. I think that this should have been something that would progress where maybe you have May and she's pretty cool. I mean, she's very outgoing. It's the opposite of what now is the depressed Hiso. So that works out. But maybe have it where things gradually get to the point where you realize, oh my God, she's also got mutant powers. Oh my God, she's there. It just ends up like boom, 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 and they're right in. But maybe it'll serve as we go forward to see how it opens up even more. But as I said, I wish I could tell you that I love this issue. I wish I could tell you I liked it as much as last issue. I did not. I thought it was clunky, but I really liked the character of May. I like Hiso, and I like the mystery. And really, by the end, seeing that guy, that kid who looks like Shadow King sort of deal, that got me intrigued again. But now we have to wait another month. And it does feel like you didn't get a ton because of the bigger panels, the layout of it, which does mirror like a manga. So with that, I'm going to give it a 7. It's still, I'm trying to be positive with the deal. I need more next issue. And I really hope there's something there for people to grab onto that might be on the fence, or really something so cool that you end up people like, okay, I didn't want to check it out, but I hear it's really good and go into it. But I can't fake the funk. I can't tell you that this is a great issue. It's not, but it's still good enough that I'm in. I'm in for the long run. Like, if anybody's listening and they're like, oh my God, I think that he's out, he's going to drop it. That's not the case. I'm in for the long haul. I just wish this was better at a point where so many people are against it that I wish it was doing something that really, like, oh my God, they can't deny that this is good. This is just going to play into the hands, I think, of a lot of people who were trying to convince themselves to maybe like it, but nah, it's weird. It's a weird idea overall. I think this would have been a better side book anyway, but here we are. But that's that. I hope that everybody, at least gives it a chance. Let me know. And I'm sure there'll be people who like it way more. And there's going to be people who think a 7 is way too high and they'll yell at me, but that's fine. We'll talk about it in the comments. We'll discuss it and whatnot. But like I said, I wish I could convince some people that this was even better than the first, but I didn't think it was. But let me know what you thought, and I'll talk to you all later.
Weird science
is the revolution.